ghost of the boss primigenius is not being summoned back into our world through the gentle hand of nature, but through the violent precision of a venture-backed needle. We are told this is rewilding, a return to a lost pastoral innocence. In the cold light of the archive, we see it for what it truly is: the deployment of a living, breathing biosecurity apparatus designed to occupy land where humans are no longer permitted to tread. This is not the resurrection of a species. It is the patenting of a perimeter. Now, let us consult the archive, analyze the sequences, and begin the forensic simulation. The dossier on Patent US-842-PRIM reveals a chilling pivot in the de-extinction narrative. That while public-facing NGOs talk of ecological balance, the underlying genetic protocol, codenamed the Neolithic Blueprint, details a sophisticated suite of synthetic morphogenesis. We aren't just looking at the selective breeding of primitive cattle like the Heck or Marimana. We are looking at a CRISPR-mediated horizontal gene transfer, the process of rewriting an entire ecosystem's code by introducing a dominant engineered apex grazer that carries a synthetic gene drive. This gene drive ensures that every offspring of the Tauros project carries the proprietary aggression marker 7X and the hypermuscularity phenotype. The forensic deconstruction of the data packets leaked from the Northern Hemispheric biorepository suggests that the goal was never to create a cow that looks like an aurochs, but to create a creature that acts like a tank. The chemistry of corporate intent is written in the sequence of the epigenetics. We see high expression levels of cortisol and testosterone regulating genes, specifically tuned to trigger intense territoriality. This is a designer predator in an herbivore's skin, optimized for the unsettling silence of the modern exclusion zone. As we peel back the layers of the $15 million seed round, led by the Atlantic Carbon Sovereignty Fund, the bioeconomics become visible. These aren't philanthropists, they are land grabbers. By introducing a protected patented entity into vast tracts of European wilderness, the sovereign wealth funds behind the initiative can effectively lock down land under the guise of habitat restoration. If the land is home to a critically reconstructed biological asset, human access is restricted, development is halted, and the land's carbon sequestration value is tokenized on a private ledger. The Aurochs is the ultimate enforcement tool. Its physiology, reconstructed through synthetic morphogenesis, includes a skull density 40% higher than modern cattle and a metabolic rate that allows for extreme endurance in sub-zero temperatures. In the lab, the clinical cyan glow of the bioreactors witnessed the forging of a creature that lacks the 1,000-year docility of its domesticated cousins. Instead, it possesses the bio-anxiety of a prehistoric titan, a programmed distrust of human presence. When we analyze the genetic markers for environmental hardiness, we find sequences derived not from ancient DNA, but from modern bioengineering designed to resist current industrial pollutants. This is a Jurassic patent with a 21st century survival kit. The de-extinction of the Aurochs is the first major successful patent-to-terror myth-busting exercise. It isn't about the past, it's about who owns the future of the soil. The biological sovereignty of the local farmer is being overwritten by the digital and genetic sovereignty of the offshore fund. We are witnessing the transition from the wild to the managed, where the manager is an algorithm and the enforcer is a 2-ton beast with a proprietary DNA signature. We now initiate the speculative simulation, a shifting from the static data of the Neolithic Blueprint to the kinetic reality of a living siege. As we overlay the predatory heat map onto the digital topography of the Carpathian buffer zones, the design intent of the Tauros becomes terrifyingly clear. We are not simulating a herd of grazers. We are simulating a deployment. In this virtual environment, the creature's high-expression cortisol levels translate into a permanent state of hypervigilance. Its neurochemistry is a delicate balance of industrial-grade aggression and instinctive territoriality, a combination that transforms the landscape into a series of exclusion zones enforced by muscle and bone. Observe the gait of the simulated asset. The synthetic morphogenesis has corrected the sagging posture of modern domesticates, are restoring the high wither profile of the ancient boss primigenius. This isn't merely aesthetic. It facilitates a charging speed of nearly 50 kilometers per hour, a kinetic force capable of breaching standard agricultural fencing with the ease of a kinetic penetrator. When the asset encounters a human-driven vehicle, the primary invasive species in the eyes of the Atlantic Carbon Sovereignty Fund, its response is not flight, but a calculated frontal intimidation. The archive's deep file on the Velebit breach provides the forensic evidence for this. A 2024 incident where a pre-release prototype systematically dismantled a series of hiking shelters. The report, buried under a non-disclosure agreement funded by an offshore shell company, I described the behavior as systematic spatial cleansing. The simulation reveals the aurochs as a form of kinetic architecture. By grazing in specific aggressive patterns, the herd creates impenetrable thickets of thorny scrub, effectively re-engineering the forest floor into a maze that favors the movement of the patented entity while obstructing human passage. This is the living siege. We see the creature's thermal tracking capabilities, enhanced by a proprietary modification to the tapetum lucidum, allowing it to remain active and territorial in the deep, foggy nights of the European highlands. The silence of the modified predator is its most unsettling trait. Unlike the lowing of cattle, the reconstructed aurochs communicates in subsonic frequencies, a low-frequency hum that resonates in the human chest cavity, inducing a primal state of bio-anxiety long before the beast is actually seen. Within the dark history of this project, we find the Rewilding Protocol, a classified experiment in the late 2000s where the sovereign wealth funds tested the psychological impact of these entities on local populations. The goal was to determine if the presence of a designer predator could sufficiently depopulate a valley without the need for legal eviction. The simulation confirms the effectiveness. When a community's biological sovereignty is compromised by a 2-ton, aggressive, and legally protected entity, the will to stay evaporates. The land becomes wild, not by nature's choice, but by corporate design. The creature is the ultimate biosecurity guard, one that requires no salary and never leaves its post. As we increase the resolution of the simulation's sensory feed, we can analyze the clinical cyan data streams that would be transmitted via the biotelemetry chips embedded in the creature's spinal column. Each beast is a node in a vast, distributed network. Their movements are tracked by satellites, their health monitored by AI, and their interactions recorded for value-add analysis. If a herd successfully excludes human presence from a designated carbon sink, the sovereign wealth fund's ledger ticks upward. The biological asset is literally printing carbon credits with every territorial display. The speculative horror lies here. The creature is not a living thing in the eyes of its creators. It is a mobile, self-replicating biological fence. The patent to terror reality is that the Aurochs is being used to dismantle the very idea of the commons. In our simulation, we see the traditional mountain pastures of the Alps and Balkans being transformed into private biological reserves. The local shepherds, whose ancestors lived alongside the original Aurochs for millennia, find their ancient knowledge rendered obsolete by the sheer biophysical dominance of the engineered version. The speculative element of this simulation is rapidly becoming historical. The Tauros is already on the ground in several pilot regions, and the data coming back confirms our forensic suspicions. The creature's aggression marker 7X is expressing perfectly. It is territorial, it is untamable, and it is legally owned by a board of directors in a tax haven. We must conclude the simulation by examining the genetic decay of the surrounding ecosystem. As the Aurochs enforces its perimeter, the lack of human management leads to a rapid chaotic shift in local flora. The synthetic morphogenesis of the Aurochs doesn't just change the animal, it changes the soil, the water, and the air. It is a gene drive for the entire landscape. The simulation shows a 30% loss in local biodiversity as the dominant patented entity consumes the niche of every other large herbivore. This is the price of corporate rewilding, a monoculture of terror disguised as a prehistoric paradise. The archive's simulation ends with a vision of a silent Europe, guarded by the ghosts of its past, owned by the ghosts of its future. The forensic trail leads us away from the muddy tracks of the Danube and into the sterile, air-conditioned corridors of the Gulf-based sovereign wealth funds. This is where the deep file fallout begins. We have tracked the flow of petrodollars through a complex network of rewilding shells, entities that present a face of environmental altruism while operating with the ruthless efficiency of a private equity firm. In the cold mathematics of the bioeconomic ledger, the Tauros is listed as a fixed biological asset, a term that strips away any lingering sentimentality regarding the return of the wild. The financialization of the Aurochs is tied directly to the volatility of global carbon markets. By re-establishing prehistoric grazing regimes, these funds can claim massive additionality in their carbon sequestration reports. However, the data reveals a darker symmetry. The same sovereign wealth funds investing in the de-extinction of the Aurochs are the primary financiers of the Green Corridor security infrastructure. The creature does not just sequester carbon, it secures the investment. When we analyze the bioeconomic impact, we see that the value of rural land increases by 200% once it is designated as a high-risk de-extinction zone. This is the Jurassic patent in action, the creation of a biological monopoly over the very concept of nature itself. The deep file suggests that the rapid expansion of these initiatives, stretching from the Scottish Highlands to the foothills of the Altai Mountains, is a coordinated biological border control strategy. In an era of climate-driven migration and land scarcity, these funds are hardening their land assets. A fence can be cut, a law can be repealed, but a critically reconstructed biological asset protected by international conservation treaties and capable of lethal territorial defense is a permanent security solution. The biological sovereignty of the local population is being quietly traded for the forensic clarity of a corporate contract. The wild is being weaponized to enforce the new boundaries of the elite. The fallout is an existential erasure. As we cross-reference the patent IDs with the current land titles, we find that the unmapped world has been effectively deleted. The Aurochs is the herald of a future where every organism is a node in a decentralized ledger of control. It is a creature born of a spreadsheet, refined in a bioreactor, and deployed as an instrument of economic dominance. The bio-anxiety we feel in its presence is the correct response. It is the realization that the grass, the trees, and the very air are being recoded to serve a master that never breathes. The Aurochs has not returned to save the earth. It has returned to foreclose upon it. The age of the unmonitored forest is over. We have replaced the accidental beauty of evolution with the cold intent of the patent office. As the last echoes of the Aurochs' low-frequency hum fade into the managed silence of the exclusion zone, we must accept a bitter truth. We are no longer observers of nature, but inhabitants of a global biological vault. The future has already been signed, sealed, and delivered.